3 years. That's how long I ran on nothing but caffeine, shift schedules, and the quiet hope that one day someone in my family would say, "Thank you." I worked mornings at Delilah's diner, stacking pancakes for regulars who tipped in loose change and advice I didn't ask for. Afternoons, I hauled boxes at a warehouse just off Route 288, where forklifts beeped louder than any human voice. And when the sun went down, I became a delivery driver for whatever app needed me most that night. Pizza, groceries, random birthday cakes. If it had an address, I brought it there. Every cent I earned went straight into a pit I hadn't dug, but somehow was expected to fill. $950,000 in debt. Real estate mistakes, a lawsuit I was never told about, and a refinancing plan that crashed before it even left the table. My parents' legacy wasn't a home or family photos, it was a number so big it stopped feeling real. No one else lifted a finger. My sister Callista said she wasn't good with stress. My father, Berlin, just kept saying things would sort themselves out. My mother, Valora, acted like the debt was a cloud that just passed over the house, nothing to panic about. But I panicked. I sold my car, lived in a rented studio above a bakery that reeked of sugar and despair, and paid down every last dollar. I thought if I saved them, they'd finally see me. One Saturday afternoon, after the final payment cleared, I bought my mother a bracelet. It wasn't expensive, just sterling silver, delicate. I'd had it engraved on the inside. "Thank you for surviving with me." It was more than a gift. It was a bridge, my last attempt to make her meet me halfway. I handed it to her at the kitchen table while she poured herself another glass of sweet tea. The house was silent, warm, unnervingly clean. She opened the box, stared for 2 seconds, then smiled. No, smirked. "Silver?" she said. "You know your sister only wears gold." Callista, standing behind her in the hallway, snorted. "Did you think that would impress her?" I didn't answer. I just nodded and reached for the bracelet, gently slid the box back into my purse like I was retrieving a receipt. The engraving burned in my mind, suddenly meaningless. That moment told me everything. It wasn't about what I gave, it was about how it looked. That same week, we had a family dinner for Lunar New Year. It wasn't our tradition originally, but Valora liked the symbolism. Prosperity, fortune, family harmony. At least, that's what she wrote in her yearly Facebook post. She had the house decorated in red and gold, a table full of dumplings and noodles. Every adult received a red envelope, a tradition meant to bless the coming year. I opened mine last. Everyone else had slipped out a crisp $100 bill, nodded politely. Mine was empty. I blinked, unsure. Did mine fall out? Valora didn't look up from her plate. "You already got more than enough this year." Callista rolled her eyes. "God, Talitha, you're always making things about you." No one else said anything. Berlin chewed. My uncle changed the subject. And I folded the envelope and tucked it into my bag like it held something other than insult. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. But that night, I opened a blank Google Doc and titled it, "Debt Paid, Still Owed." I wrote about the bracelet, the envelope, the unpaid emotional invoices I carried around like unpaid parking tickets. Every small comment, every glance that dismissed me, every time they said Callista was the gentle one or the prettier one, while I was the practical one, as if that was some kind of insult covered in compliment. They didn't see me as family. I was the employee who couldn't quit. "Family doesn't owe you love, only a roof and food," I remembered hearing once. But what if I was the roof? What if I built the damn foundation? By the end of that week, I'd made a decision. If they could treat me like a footnote, I'd stop offering them whole chapters. I didn't say anything. I didn't scream or make threats. I just started saving again. But this time, not for them. I worked extra hours and opened a separate savings account labeled Exit. I found an old box at the back of my closet, opened it, and stared at the bracelet still inside. I hadn't thrown it away. I wasn't sure why. "One day," I whispered, "I'll give this to someone who knows what it means." Then I closed the box, put on my jacket, and walked out the door toward another night shift. As I pulled out of the driveway, headlights flashed in my rear view. Callista's boyfriend, probably. They were always going out, always being seen. I, on the other hand, worked. In silence, in the dark. For people who couldn't see me even in daylight. But it wasn't the empty envelope or the cold bracelet that broke me. It was what they said next. I showed up 15 minutes late. It wasn't intentional. I just didn't have a choice. The warehouse had been short-staffed that day, and I didn't want to leave mid-shift. Besides, it was my father's birthday dinner. You'd think the daughter who paid off nearly $1 million of family debt would be welcomed with a slice of cake and a seat at the table. Instead, I walked into a room already full. Laughter echoed from the dining room. Dishes clattered gently, wine glasses clinked. Warm light spilled over a long table where everyone seemed perfectly positioned. My sister Callista sat next to Valora, already halfway through her second glass of red. Berlin, my father, raised his glass as someone made a toast I'd clearly missed. No one noticed me standing in the doorway. I slipped off my coat and stepped into the dining room. There was no chair for me. Valora glanced up. "Oh, you should have told us you were coming." "I said I'd try," I replied, steady. "Well," she sighed, "you know how last-minute things go." She didn't move to make space. Neither did anyone else. I walked around the back wall and found myself leaning against the kitchen counter, a paper plate in hand, loaded with cold string beans and a lump of mashed potatoes. Everyone else had porcelain. I stood in silence while they passed around the brisket, joked about old stories, and swapped work gossip. Nobody even asked why I was standing. Eventually, Valora turned to Callista and gushed, "The casserole is perfect. You really do have a knack for this, sweetie." "I used that new cookware set, the one with the gold handles," Callista replied, her voice loud and bright. "The food just tastes better in pretty things, you know?" "Of course," Valora said, nodding. "I wish I had time to cook," I offered, trying to insert myself. Callista looked at me with that half-smile she always wore when she thought I was overreaching. "You're always working," she said. "You probably eat standing up every night." I forced a laugh. "Sometimes, depends on the shift." Across the table, Berlin was sipping his wine, eyes focused on a spot on the wall. He didn't speak to me. A neighbor leaned toward Valora and whispered, "Isn't that the daughter who works at the warehouse?" Valora responded with a polite smile, not correcting her. I took another bite of my cold food and pretended not to hear. It hit me then. I wasn't invisible. I was strategically ignored. A presence acknowledged only when it benefited the narrative. And tonight, that narrative didn't have room for me. At dessert, Valora stood up with her wine glass in hand. "We have one more reason to celebrate," she announced. "Callista just closed on her new home." The table burst into applause. Callista clapped modestly. "It's just a small cottage near Lake Louisville, 2 bedrooms, a backyard." "That's wonderful," someone said. "You deserve it." I blinked. "Didn't we just pay off the house loan together? I mean, the one here?" Valora waved a hand. "That's done. Callista has potential. She just needs the right environment to thrive." I didn't say anything, but my stomach twisted. 3 years of skipped meals, secondhand clothes, broken sleep, and canceled vacations, and the money I freed up was funneled into a future I wasn't even allowed to imagine for myself. The applause resumed. Callista raised her glass. I picked up my empty plate and carried it to the sink. After everyone left, I walked a lap around the neighborhood. The sky was fading to blue, and the air smelled like grass and charcoal. I opened Zillow and began scrolling through apartments in Austin and San Antonio. 1-bedroom units, no roommates, no ties. I remembered something Maya Angelou once said. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. They'd shown me. Not in loud declarations, but in paper plates and disappearing chairs. By the time I got back to my car, I knew. I wasn't leaving out of anger. I was just finally catching up to the truth. The next morning, I got a text from Valora. "Sunday brunch at 11. Family comes first. Don't be late." I didn't reply. Instead, I took an extra shift at the diner. I served pancakes and poured coffee, saved my tips, and deposited the bonus check that hit my account. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. On my break, I opened a new tab and bookmarked a listing for a studio in Austin. Small, clean, quiet, rentable in 2 weeks. Later that night, Callista posted a photo of herself holding a sold sign in front of her new home. The caption read, "New beginnings, built on hard work and family support." I stared at the screen for a long time before clicking off. They wanted a version of family that looked good on social media, and I was never part of that picture. I thought standing at the sink was the lowest point. But my family wasn't done teaching me how invisible I could be. It was just supposed to be tea. That's what Valora said in the group text. Let's have a casual family check-in. Nothing big, just tea. I should have known better. Whenever my mother used the word casual, it meant staged, and when she said family, it usually meant everyone but you. I walked into the living room that Sunday afternoon with the scent of lemon cookies and overbrewed chamomile hanging in the air. Callista was already curled up on the sofa, legs tucked under her like she lived in a Pottery Barn ad. Berlin sat beside her, newspaper folded on his lap, reading glasses perched halfway down his nose. Valora stood by the fireplace with a folder in hand, her lips tight but smiling. "I'm glad you could make it," she said, not quite looking at me. "Sure," I answered, hanging my coat by the door. "Didn't know this was a full-blown meeting." Valora chuckled, that rehearsed laugh she used in front of company. "Well, sometimes things come up. It's good for us to talk." Then she handed out papers, printed, color-coded, collated. Callista took hers with a small gasp, eyes already scanning. Berlin didn't even glance at his, just passed it to Callista as if she were the designated reader. I stood there, hand slightly extended, waiting. Nothing came my way. Valora looked at me, her tone soft, the kind people use when they're about to kick you in the stomach. "We're moving forward with some long-term estate planning, just practical things. You have your own life now, Talitha." I stared at her. "Excuse me?" "We've decided to rework the will," she said. "You've always been so independent. Callista's been here, building a foundation. She's ready for the responsibility." I didn't move. I didn't speak. My chest burned, but my face stayed blank. Callista flipped through the document like it was a catalog. 60% for the primary residence. That's fair. I mean, I already help Mom with the mail, the groceries. Valora nodded. And this way, she'll have stability. I looked at Berlin. He adjusted his glasses, said nothing, so that's how it was going to be. They'd used the money I gave them, the time, the years, the silence, and rerouted it to Callista, the daughter who showed up just enough to take the credit. Later that week, I tried to focus on work, but something pulled me back to that moment, that document, that room. I thought I'd seen every way they could reject me. I was wrong. On Wednesday, I got a notification on my phone. "You've been tagged in a photo." It was Valora's Facebook. A picture from a charity event I'd organized 2 months earlier. Me, in the background, holding a clipboard, smiling at one of the volunteers. But the caption said, "So proud of Callista's outreach work, always giving back." I stared at it for 10 full seconds, waiting for the punchline. Then I scrolled through the comments. "Callista, you're amazing! You're a true community leader. Like mother, like daughter." And then, at the bottom, Callista herself. "Thanks, Mom. I love giving back." I slammed my laptop shut. The next day, I drove over. Not to start a fight, just to ask. Valora opened the door with a smile too tight to be genuine. "I didn't know you were stopping by." "I saw the post," I said. "That photo. That was my event." She blinked. "Was it? Oh, well, you know how social media is. People like seeing Callista involved. She's relatable." "She didn't even attend," I said. Valora shrugged. "It's not a big deal. Why are you making this into something?" I turned to go, but her voice followed me down the steps. "Honestly, Talitha, you could stand to be less dramatic." I didn't reply. I didn't trust myself to. When I got home, I opened a folder on my computer titled "What Really Happened." It had started as a space to store receipts, invoices, screenshots of paid bills. I added the Facebook screenshot. Then I started uploading photos, me organizing the event, calling volunteers, writing the press release. I didn't know what I'd use it for, but I needed it. For me. There's a lake near Callista's new place. I drove there that Friday, parked the car, and walked to the edge. The water was still. A few ducks floated aimlessly. A jogger passed behind me. I whispered to no one in particular. I built this silence. Now, I'll weaponize it. It wasn't a threat. It was a vow. Later that night, I started researching legal name removals, asset tracing, identity theft laws, and quiet steps for detaching from toxic family systems. I didn't want revenge. I wanted separation. With evidence, it wasn't the first time they edited me out, but I promise it will be the last time they do it without consequence. It was the kind of heat that made everything slow down, the kind that clung to your skin and refused to let go. Inside the warehouse, the fans were barely cutting it, and my shirt clung to me like a second skin soaked through. I'd skipped lunch again. Too many orders, not enough hands, and I didn't want to leave the team short. Around 3 in the afternoon, I felt the floor sway beneath me. At first, I thought someone had knocked into me. Then the pallet jack blurred in my vision, and the next thing I knew, my knees hit the concrete. Voices swirled around me, disjointed. "She's down. Go get someone." I remember the coolness of the floor against my cheek. I remember someone trying to prop me up, and someone else shouting about calling 911. Later, as I lay in the ambulance, someone asked, "How long since you ate?" "I don't remember," I murmured. The EMT looked at me with pity, not judgment. "You're burning out, ma'am." At the hospital, I was hooked to an IV. Dehydration. Sleep deprivation. Stress-induced syncope. The nurse patted my shoulder gently. "You need rest. Real rest." My phone vibrated on the tray beside me. "Valora, is this going to cost us more?" Not a, "Are you okay?" Not even a call. Just that. My heart monitor spiked. I stared at the screen, watching the numbers blink like accusations. The next morning, Valora showed up at the hospital with Berlin trailing a few steps behind. She carried no flowers, no get-well card, not even a coffee. "Why didn't you tell someone you weren't doing well?" she asked, sitting at the edge of the bed like this was somehow my fault. "You've been working yourself to the bone," Berlin added, though his eyes never met mine. "That's not sustainable." "You think I don't know that?" I replied, my voice low. Valora opened her purse and pulled out a bill. "The ambulance charge alone is outrageous. Honestly, you could have just asked one of us to drive you." "Right," I said, voice tight. "Like you would have dropped your wine glass to pick me up off a warehouse floor." Her phone buzzed. She picked it up, smiled. "Oh, Callista says, drama queen move, collapsing like that." I turned to the nurse who was adjusting my chart. "Can I discharge myself now?" The nurse leaned close and whispered, "Do you have anyone else we can call?" It wasn't a clinical question. It was human, and it hit me harder than any diagnosis. Later that afternoon, I sat in the back seat of a rideshare. The driver made polite conversation, but I barely registered it. I just needed to get home, just needed my bed, my space. But when I got there, something was different. Outside my bedroom door sat a plastic bin, a clear one with a blue lid. Inside, my textbooks, my work shoes, a sweatshirt I used to wear when I studied late at night, and the silver bracelet, still in its box. Valora was on the couch, legs crossed, sipping from her usual wine glass. "We just needed the space for the baby," she said without looking up. "You'll understand when you're a mother." Callista, in the background, was filming the freshly painted walls for Instagram. She smiled wide, holding a stuffed giraffe. "So blessed," she said into the phone. I stood there, staring at my belongings like they were debris from someone else's life. No conversation, no warning, just the bin. My room was gone, already transformed into a pastel nursery with clouds on the walls and a rug that said "Little Miracle." I knelt, closed the lid of the bin, and picked it up. But I opened the box inside and slipped the bracelet into my pocket, along with my journal. "I didn't walk out because they kicked me out," I whispered. "I walked out because staying would mean erasing myself." That night, I slept on a friend's couch. The springs poked through the cushion, and I used my coat as a blanket. But I slept. In the quiet, I opened my journal and wrote, "I'm done negotiating my existence. I remembered something I'd once heard in a podcast. If the home you built becomes your prison, you need to break out, not break down. The next morning, I scrolled through listings again. Studios, one-bedrooms, Denton, Austin, even a few in Waco. I didn't care where, only that the lease had my name on it. And for the first time, I did something small, but huge. I left the family group chat. It was a digital severing, yes, but symbolic too. The silence was immediate. No one reached out, no one asked why. A few days later, I texted Valora. "I'll pick up the rest of my things next weekend. Please leave them boxed." The reply came within minutes. "Don't be dramatic. It's still your home." I didn't respond. Instead, I spent the evening researching mailbox rental services, looking into secure storage, changing my mailing address. I ordered a small fireproof safe. I started closing joint accounts and rerouting everything to a new name. This wasn't just leaving, it was severing. I gave them my time, my strength, my future. All I got in return was a box by the door. Mid-September brought a shift in the air, cooler evenings, quieter mornings. I was finishing up an invoice on my laptop when an email popped in from Mrs. Tully, an old neighbor who used to live 3 houses down from us. "Hope to see you at Callista's big day," the message read, followed by a flyer image for Callista's wedding. Date, time, venue, all there. Everyone else had apparently received theirs weeks ago. I hadn't. I checked my mailbox, nothing. Scrolled my texts, nothing. So I texted Valora. "Hey, did I miss an invitation for Callista's wedding?" Her reply came 5 minutes later. "We assumed you'd be too busy with work to attend. You've got a lot going on, right?" That was it. No apology, no further explanation. I sat back, phone in hand, breath caught in my throat. I wasn't overlooked. I was omitted. The kind of omission that required intention. Being forgotten hurts. But being excluded on purpose, being planned out of the picture, that cuts deeper. Still, I showed up. I wore a neutral dress. No red, no white, no black. Nothing to draw attention, just soft beige. A gift bag in one hand, car keys in the other. I'd told myself I wasn't there to make a statement, just to be present, to be seen. The venue was beautiful. Callista always had a flair for aesthetics. Flowers draped every railing, candles floated in glass bowls, and a string quartet played Vivaldi like we were in some Southern wedding magazine spread. At the entrance, the doorman looked down at his iPad. "Name? Talitha Gorin." He tapped, paused, tapped again. "I don't see you on the list." "Check under GOREN, I said, calmly. Still nothing. Before I could respond, Callista appeared, dressed in her rehearsal satin, eyes wide. "You actually came?" "Didn't think I would?" I asked. She didn't answer. Valora walked up behind her, makeup perfect, hair in place. "Sweetheart," she said, not to me. "This is Callista's moment." You showing up uninvited sends the wrong message. The word uninvited rang in my ears like a bell. Loud, clear. Berlin stood behind them, arms crossed. He didn't say a word. Again. I glanced at the doorman, who was now looking visibly uncomfortable. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I think it's best—" "I understand," I cut in. I handed him the gift bag. "For the bride." As I turned to leave, I caught Callista's voice behind me. "Honestly, Mom, what did she expect?" I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a public notice. A declaration that I didn't belong. Sometimes dignity is walking away with the truth they can't admit. Days later, Valora posted a full album titled Our Beautiful Beginning. I should have skipped it, should have just blocked her. But curiosity won. I scrolled. Dozens of photos. Callista and her husband cutting the cake, toasting champagne, dancing under string lights. Distant cousins, old neighbors, even kids I hadn't seen since we were in kindergarten. Not a single photo of me. I clicked back to older albums. Thanksgiving, family BBQ, Berlin's birthday. One by one, I noticed the same thing. I was gone, not cropped out, not blurred, just never included. I took screenshots and started a folder, named it Proof of Absence, Because you don't have to die to disappear from someone's life. I sat in bed that night and opened my journal. I laid it all out. The will, the red envelopes, the hospital visit, the nursery. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was design. Planned invisibility. They weren't ignoring me. They were removing me. Some families don't break you. They bury you quietly in plain sight, and I'd been holding my breath under that dirt for years, so I started planning, not out of revenge, but preservation. The gift I'd brought to the wedding arrived back at my apartment a week later. No note. Unopened. And the card still tucked into the ribbon. I carried the box outside and left it on a park bench across the street. Someone would find it. Maybe they'd need it more than my family ever did. I wasn't going to carry weight meant for people who never intended to hold space for me. That night, I made myself a rule. Simple, clear. No one erases me again without permission. They edited me out of their life story. Now it's time I publish mine. It started with a notification, a simple buzz on my phone from the credit monitoring app I'd signed up for months ago, just in case. I was at the grocery store, half listening to the self-checkout prompt, when the message appeared on my screen. New loan activity detected. $30,000 personal loan. Approved. My first thought wasn't panic. It was confusion. I hadn't applied for a loan. I hadn't even inquired. I paid for my groceries without finishing the transaction. The eggs rolled slightly as I shoved the bag into the cart and made a beeline to my car. Once inside, I opened the app, scrolled through the details, lender name, approval date, and most unsettling of all, the email linked to the application was mine. I pulled up my bank accounts. No sign of funds moving in or out. And then I remembered. Months ago, Valora had handed me a stack of papers. "It's just paperwork for refinancing," she'd said. "We're consolidating everything. Just sign the bottom. I'll take care of the rest." I had signed. I hadn't read. By that evening, I had confirmation. The loan had been initiated by my parents, using my information, my name, my credit score. They didn't forge my signature. They hadn't needed to. They'd just counted on my trust. I drove straight to their house. The door was already open, as if they'd known I was coming. Valora looked up from her wine glass. "Sweetheart, everything okay?" "You took out a loan in my name?" She didn't blink. "It was for the house. Plumbing repairs. We meant to tell you." "You meant to tell me?" Berlin walked in from the kitchen, drying his hands with a dish towel. "Talitha, it's not like we drained your bank account. You have excellent credit. We're family." I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. "I am not your bank." Callista walked by with a bowl of fruit, paused, and smirked. "You've always been a little dramatic about money." I turned to Valora. "Do you even hear yourselves?" Valora set her glass down with a soft clink. "It was handled. The loan is being paid. No harm done." "No harm? You used my name without my consent. That's fraud." "It's not fraud if it's family," she said calmly, as if that line had legal backing. I stood there for a moment, letting the weight of it settle. They hadn't just crossed a line, they'd set it on fire. "Trust," I said, "once sold, can never be returned at full value." I walked out. The next week, I met with Mr. Henderson, an accountant who'd helped Valora and Berlin years ago. I didn't have many people I could trust, but he'd always seemed more numbers than noise. He pulled up a spreadsheet from the last few years. "You paid down the debt from 2020 to 2023, he said, clicking through tabs. "There was a surplus at the end, about 70,000. I looked up. "What surplus?" He hesitated. "It wasn't disclosed to you?" "No." That amount was reallocated to a new family trust. For Callista's future children, education, home support, those kinds of expenses. I sat there, speechless. "I thought I'd cleared their debt," I whispered. "Turns out, I funded their legacy." Henderson shifted uncomfortably. "It's technically legal, but morally..." "Disgusting," I finished for him. He nodded. "I can provide the records, if you need them." "I do." Back home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened my laptop, created a new folder. what they took. Inside, I started saving everything. Screenshots, transaction histories, call logs, emails. I printed out loan documents, highlighted inconsistencies. I saved the image of the spreadsheet Henderson sent me. I even uploaded voice memos, my own recollections, time-stamped. That week, I visited a legal aid clinic in town. I wasn't sure what I could do, but I needed to know my rights. The lawyer across the table, a young woman named Selena, listened quietly. "You're not alone," she said when I finished. This happens more than people realize, especially in close-knit families where financial boundaries blur. What can I do? Start documenting. Everything. Then we build a case. I nodded. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wanted clarity, legally, emotionally, and I wanted out. I closed the shared account I still had with Valora, froze my credit, opened a new bank account at a different branch. I moved all my money, what little remained, into it. I ordered a fireproof safe, tucked it under my bed, and locked inside my passport, the bracelet, my journal, and a copy of the trust records. I changed my passwords. I signed up for a paid identity protection service. And that night, I wrote in my journal, "They've stolen from me for the last time. The next move is mine." I wasn't just recovering. I was reclaiming. They used my name to build a future for others. Now I'll use their silence to build mine. The call came on a Tuesday morning as I was reviewing budget projections for a community grant. The voice on the other end was warm and cheerful, too cheerful for someone I didn't recognize. "Talitha, we're just over the moon about the outreach event. Your speech was so powerful. The photos turned out great, too." My pen froze mid-sentence. "I'm sorry, which event?" "The fundraiser for the after-school program. We sent a newsletter this morning. It features you prominently." I opened my email while she kept talking. And there it was. My face in the headline image, microphone in hand, standing beside a banner I designed. Below the photo, a bold caption. "Callista Lawton leads initiative to inspire youth." The article quoted my speech, word for word, the press release I'd written, but the signature on the media submission, Callista. I ended the call quickly, thanked her, and stared at the screen. I clicked through the PDF, each paragraph a reminder that my name had been erased, my work passed off as someone else's. Valora's email account had submitted the press kit. I forwarded the newsletter to myself, took a screenshot, saved both to the folder I now kept encrypted, and backed up in 3 locations. Later that night, I called Valora. "You used my work and gave her the credit." There was a pause. "Callista needed a win. You already have your job." It was my speech, my event. "Sweetheart, people like seeing Callista in the spotlight. She connects better." She said it like it was fact, not preference, truth. "They needed me to build the house," I whispered after the call ended, "but they never planned to put my name on the deed." I emailed the newsletter editor and attached documents with timestamps. I didn't make a scene, just asked for a correction. Politely. That same night, I started building a website, a quiet portfolio, timestamps, certifications, media files. I titled it, Proof of Contribution. Days passed. Then came the memory that haunted me more than the newsletter. A month earlier, I'd been dating someone, Ryan, an accountant, steady, soft-spoken, thoughtful in a way that didn't feel rehearsed. We had been getting serious. He asked questions, listened. For the first time in years, I'd let someone into the parts of me I usually kept padlocked. And then, without warning, he began pulling away. Missed calls, canceled plans, cold silences over coffee. When I finally confronted him, he looked pained. Not angry, ashamed. "Your mom reached out to me," he said. I blinked. "What?" "She told me, some things. That you'd been through a lot. That you carried a lot of emotional instability." The words knocked the air from my lungs. "She said I should be careful. That you get intense." He looked like he wanted to apologize, but didn't. I nodded. "Thanks for being honest." He left that afternoon. I never heard from him again. That night, Valora sent a text. "He wasn't strong enough for you anyway." I didn't reply. I just opened my folder and created a new document, manipulation log. The next week, I needed help moving boxes from my friend Naomi's garage. I'd stored things there after leaving my parents' house, and Naomi was moving to Austin. I texted Callista, "Can you help me move a few boxes? Just need another set of hands." She replied with a single emoji, laughing face with tears. Then followed up, "You should have thought about that before playing the victim." I stared at the screen, saved the message, added it to the log, then I opened my contacts. Deleted every family number from the emergency section. My new list? One name, Naomi. I wasn't just distancing, I was cutting cords, logistical, emotional, symbolic. That evening, I sat alone on my patio. The sun was setting. The sky was a watercolor mess of lavender and orange. I thought about the saying I'd once heard, "If they won't hand you the mic, build your own stage." So I did. I started a new LinkedIn profile. Honest, bold. I removed vague job descriptions and listed the community events I'd led. Under my name, I signed up for a storytelling workshop, rented a PO box. No more shared mail, no more blurred lines. These weren't tasks, they were declarations. I didn't expect fairness anymore. I prepared for exposure. They think they're burying me in silence, but I've been learning how to write my own headlines. I came back on a quiet Saturday afternoon. I hadn't planned to, but there were still a few things left in the hallway closet. I figured I'd be in and out in 10 minutes, no conversation necessary. The front door was unlocked, as usual. No one greeted me. Inside, the living room was filled with wrapping paper and the sugary scent of cake. I walked past the dining table, and that's when I saw it. A box, pink and polka-dotted, sat at the center of the table, opened slightly, lid askew, revealing a familiar edge of parchment. I moved closer, already knowing. My MBA degree, folded, bent at the corners, stuffed beneath layers of tissue paper to pad the bottom of a birthday gift. It had been stripped from its frame. I didn't touch it. I just stood there, staring at something that had once taken me years to earn, now used like scrap filler. Valora stepped in from the kitchen, holding a cupcake tray. "Oh, you're here." I kept my eyes on the box. "That's my diploma." She followed my gaze, then shrugged. "It's just paper, Talitha. At least now it's being useful." Callista walked in behind her, giggling. "It kept the mug from cracking. That box took a hit in the car." I didn't respond. I walked over, lifted the degree out gently, and smoothed it on the table like I was pressing the wrinkles out of something sacred. My hands were steady, but my chest felt like it had been hollowed out. Berlin stood by the hallway, arms crossed. Not a word. I placed the paper in my bag without folding it again. "I didn't spend 2 years learning resilience to be told I'm recyclable," I said. Valora snorted. "Oh, don't be so sensitive." "No," I said, finally looking her in the eye. "I'm just done being silent." I turned to leave, but she called after me. "We gave you everything," Valora said, "and you gave us nothing. You were a bad investment." I stopped. I didn't flinch, didn't let her see anything on my face. Then I turned around, slowly. "If I was such a bad investment," I asked, "why did I pay your debt?" She smiled, like she'd been waiting for the question. "Because you owed us for raising you." The silence that followed cracked something open. It wasn't just quiet. It was final. "Then consider the debt repaid in full," I said, "with interest." And I walked out. Not from the house, from the role, from the version of me they'd built, a dutiful daughter, a silent workhorse, an unacknowledged credit line in human form. I got back to my apartment that evening and opened my laptop. I uploaded every document, every receipt, email, bank transfer, photo, and screenshot to a private archive. Then I created a presentation and titled it, "What Being a Bad Investment Looks Like." Next, I opened a blank post in a community group. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. I listed dates, described the patterns, the erasure, the theft disguised as parenting, the manipulation disguised as concern. Within hours, messages flooded in. I thought I was the only one. "I've been there too." "You're not crazy, you're just awake." I didn't feel exposed. I felt seen. I wasn't invisible anymore. That night, I sat by the window with my journal open. "They thought I was silent because I was ashamed," I wrote. "But I was silent because I was building my storm." I registered for a TEDx audition. Topic: When family isn't your home. I didn't tell anyone. Instead, I signed up for coaching, started writing my speech, and cleared my calendar for the coming weeks. My voice wasn't shaky anymore. My story wasn't tangled in apology. I wasn't just healing, I was mobilizing. They said I was a waste. I'll show them what real value looks like on stage. The auditorium was filled with claps, camera flashes, and the rustle of graduation robes. People cheered, balloons bobbed overhead, families huddled for group photos in the aisles. I stood backstage, adjusting the cap that had already flattened my curls and pulling my hood into place. Then my name was called. I stepped out. The applause rose, but all I saw was the front row, 5 empty chairs, each marked by a small folded card. Mom, Dad, Callista, Grandpa, Aunt V. Neatly printed. Waiting. Nobody came. I walked to the center, accepted my degree, nodded toward the dean. I smiled for the official photo. When I bowed, it was for myself. Absence used to hurt, I thought. Now it just confirms what I already knew. After the ceremony, the courtyard filled with families, mothers crying, fathers taking blurry photos, grandparents holding flowers, students tossing caps into the air. I slipped mine off and carried it quietly in my hands. There were no hugs waiting. No cameras following me. I took a selfie near a tree, the only person in the frame. I walked back to my car alone, diploma in hand, sat behind the wheel in silence. The seatbelt clicked like punctuation. The cap lay on the dashboard, a symbol of everything I had done and everything I didn't get in return. Maybe the degree wasn't for them. Maybe it was permission to finally let go. Earlier that week, there had been another event, a party I wasn't invited to. Valora and Berlin's 30th anniversary, a community center in town. Catered, formal. I didn't go, I didn't want to, but I did send something. A sealed envelope, pinned to the gift table with a ribbon. The note read, "A gift that won't fit in a box." Inside the envelope, a letter, typed, folded, clean. "You won't read this today, maybe not even tomorrow. But when you do, I want you to remember, I didn't ask for this war. I only ever wanted to belong. I paid your debts. I stood in silence while you erased me. I worked 3 jobs to hold together the house you dismantled behind my back. I wasn't the problem in this family. I was the receipt. Multiple guests read it. Some folded it again and put it back down. Others took photos. I heard later that a few left early. One neighbor reportedly asked Valora if the letter was true. Valora denied it. Callista called it delusional fiction. But the mood shifted. The celebration soured. I didn't see it, but I felt it. I had finally spoken in a language they understood, image. Afterward, messages started trickling in. An aunt I hadn't heard from in years wrote, "I had no idea. Want to get coffee?" Another relative, "If even half of that is true, you're braver than I've ever been." And Valora, of course, "You've embarrassed this family. Was that your goal?" My reply was short. No, my goal was to survive it. Then I added one more thing, and maybe now I will. I walked around the lake near my apartment the next morning. The same lake where Valora once staged those perfect family photos, coordinated outfits, fake smiles, quotes about blessings in the captions. This time, I walked alone. The diploma was in my tote. I set up a small tripod and took a photo. Me, standing tall, sunlight cutting across my face, the water calm behind me. It wasn't posed, it wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And I smiled, not because someone told me to, because I meant it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. It just didn't look how I imagined. The house may have been theirs, but the truth, finally, was mine. It was a cold Saturday in January, not dramatic cold, just the kind that made people wear coats even when the sun peeked out. I had a manila folder in my bag, the last of my paperwork from the house. I didn't want to go back there, but it felt cleaner to return it in person, instead of pretending we were still passing things back and forth through half-hearted texts. Valora was hosting something. There were cars in the driveway, shoes by the front door, the familiar clinking of coffee mugs and controlled laughter floating from the kitchen. I didn't knock. I just walked in. The kitchen was full, neighbors, a few of her bridge club friends, and Callista, of course, perched at the counter with a glass of rosé and that tired Instagram smile. I nodded toward Valora, walked to the sink, reached for a glass from the cabinet, and then it happened. My fingers slipped. The plate I accidentally nudged off the drying rack hit the floor. Ceramic shattered, sharp and loud. Valora didn't blink. She didn't hesitate. "You always ruin everything," she yelled, voice cutting through the room like a snapped violin string. "Just like you ruin every room you walk into." Silence. Every head turned. Conversations died mid-laugh. The moment held its breath. I knelt and picked up the shards, one by one, careful not to cut myself. I didn't apologize. Someone whispered near the coffee pot. Was that really necessary? I stood, set the broken pieces on the counter, nodded to no one in particular, and turned to leave. On my way out, an older man followed me through the foyer. He was one of Valora's longtime acquaintances, a retired family lawyer whose name I couldn't remember. He stopped me gently. "I've seen a lot of courtroom drama in my life," he said, "but I've never seen someone handle humiliation with more dignity." I didn't respond, but I didn't need to, because it clicked, right there on that front porch. They still thought I was the mess. But I was just the one who stopped cleaning it up. Back home, I pulled out the external hard drive from the drawer, typed in the password, and opened the folder I had built for months. Screenshots, call logs, bank statements, letters signed in my name, audio clips, witness accounts, emails from the hospital, even the receipts from the groceries I'd covered when they said the card was acting up. I attached it all to a new email. To Lauren Wexler. Subject, formal proceeding prep. Body. It's time. Let's begin with the financial abuse and unauthorized debt. Her reply came within an hour. We have more than enough. I'll initiate contact. Brace for pushback. I didn't brace. I breathed. I added a new row to my spreadsheet labeled Value Reclaimed, updated the status, filed, awaiting response. 3 days later, Valora called. "You ungrateful brat," she snapped the second I answered. "You're dragging this family through the mud for what? Public sympathy? A pity parade?" I didn't yell. I didn't cry. "I have nothing to be grateful for," I said slowly, "when all I got from you was debt and disgrace." She hung up. Callista posted a vague story on Instagram that night. Betrayal always comes from inside the house. But something else happened too. My boss, a woman who'd never once asked about my personal life, pulled me aside after a team meeting. "You're standing taller lately," she said. "Whatever it is, keep going. You walk like someone who isn't hiding anymore." That night, I went to dinner alone. A little Italian spot on the corner. Candle on the table. Piano in the background. I ordered what I wanted without checking the price. I brought a notebook and wrote 2 sentences at the top of the page. I thought power looked like shouting louder. Turns out, it looks like walking away with proof. I practiced my court statement aloud the next morning. Just facts. No flair. I didn't want to be pitied. I wanted to be clear. And that's exactly what I planned to be. They wanted silence. Now they'll hear every word in front of a judge. I was packing up the last few boxes in my storage unit when I found it, an old cardboard container labeled high school stuff, dusty, dented, forgotten. Inside were notebooks, a cracked snow globe, and at the very bottom, a cream-colored envelope. My name was written on it in slanted, careful handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Roscoe Bellamy, my grandfather. He passed when I was 16. We were close in the way that didn't require words, just long afternoons on his porch swing and the occasional lemon drop handed off like a secret handshake. Valora said he never left me anything, that he died suddenly, and there were no notes, no letters. But here it was, still sealed. My hands shook a little as I sat on the cold floor of the unit and peeled the envelope open. The paper was thin, faded, but the words hit like they'd just been written. If the day ever comes when you feel alone in this family, know that I saw you. I believed in you. You were always enough. That was all. But it cracked something wide open in me. I cried. Not like before, not in pain, not out of anger. This time, it was recognition, release. Maybe love didn't need to be loud. Maybe it just needed to be remembered. I framed the letter the next day and hung it on the wall in my new apartment above my desk. No photos of family, no mementos from the past. Just Roscoe's words sitting quietly, telling me I had never been invisible, not to everyone. That letter became my anchor. The next weekend, I took a walk through Denton's town square. The place hadn't changed much. Cafes still served bitter coffee. The same bookstore still had that crooked sign. I used to walk this path back when I thought this town was my entire world. Now it felt smaller, but it didn't sting anymore. Pain wasn't proof of failure. Sometimes it's the birthplace of freedom. I stopped by the campus, visited the old business building. A student recognized me and asked if I was the woman from the story group. I nodded. She said she'd heard I was speaking to undergrads about estrangement and career pivots. "You made it seem less scary," she said. Maybe that was the point. I journaled that night. What do I want next? Not what I want to escape from, but what I want to build. I wrote about starting a mentorship program. I added names of women I'd met online, people who felt like echoes of me. I circled back to the idea of legacy, not the kind in wills or bank accounts, the kind that grows when someone else finds safety in your words. Therapy helped too, not the kind where you sob on a couch, the kind where someone sits across from you and says, "You're not crazy, you were conditioned." That kind of permission rewires you. A week later, I got an email from Callista. Subject: "Just so you know. Mom isn't doing well. She says you broke her." I didn't reply. I forwarded the email to my lawyer with a short subject line, documentation. A few days after that, I ran into Berlin at the grocery store. He was in the canned soup aisle, staring at labels like the world was ending. We made eye contact. He looked away. I walked past him. Not angry, not bitter, just complete. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's no longer needing their apology to move forward. With spring came clarity. I launched my own consulting business, focused on ethical leadership, nonprofit management, and workplace boundaries. My first client was a woman starting a shelter for teens who aged out of foster care. My MBA was finally serving something I could believe in. I began posting short reflections online, threads on family estrangement, financial manipulation, rebuilding after betrayal. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. People found their own in my words. One day, a small podcast reached out, focused on adult children navigating toxic homes. They asked me to join for a live interview. I agreed. At the end of the episode, the host asked, "What do you say to someone who feels guilty for walking away?" I said, "You're not disloyal for leaving those who made loyalty a weapon." The message board lit up. I signed off the interview and sat in silence for a moment, watching the sun stretch through the apartment blinds. I hadn't gotten a new family, but I finally got myself back, and this time, I'm not giving her away. The courthouse was colder than I expected, not just the air conditioning, something in the marble, the stillness. I wore navy, no makeup, hair pulled back, no layers to hide behind. Lauren met me at the security line, her arms full of files and calm professionalism. "They're already inside," she said. "I know." We walked past heavy doors and into the small hearing room. Valora, Callista, and Berlin sat on the right side of the aisle. Valora wore a cream blazer and a look that said, "This is beneath me." Callista scrolled her phone. Berlin avoided my eyes. I sat across from them, set my water down, and unfolded my notes. I didn't shake. Not this time. This wasn't a hearing for closure. It was for truth. Lauren began. "Your Honor, we have submitted full documentation regarding unauthorized use of the plaintiff's personal identity, financial fraud, and breach of trust under state and federal law." A projection screen lit up. Every dollar, every form, every login from their IP address. I didn't speak until it was my turn. "I wasn't just exploited," I said. "I was erased." But paper remembers what people pretend to forget. The room stayed quiet after that. The judge took a long pause, then called for a recess and recommended immediate mediation. "Should these records hold up," he added, "the next step is criminal." Outside the courtroom, no one looked at me, Not even once. By the next morning, word had spread. In our town, gossip travels faster than court documents. Valora's circle began to shrink. Friends declined dinner invites. A parent at her book club canceled the spring event. Callista's fundraiser, a campaign she launched for a wellness retreat for women entrepreneurs, was frozen. Donations disappeared. One morning, I received a letter in the mail, thick envelope, the same lawyer who had once brushed off my concerns. Inside, an apology. I didn't write back. This was never about revenge. It was about restoring the balance. Weeks later, I filed a petition to formally remove myself from the Lawton Family Trust. It wasn't required, but I wanted it documented. The clerk at the counter looked up and asked, "Any reason you're severing ties?" I said, "You don't get to keep the benefits of me while rejecting my existence." He didn't ask another question. I signed the paperwork, initialed where needed, and walked out. The sun hit my skin just right that day. Not warm, not soft, just honest. I wasn't floating anymore. I had weight, but it was mine. 3 months later, I stood under bright lights at TEDx Denton, red circle on the carpet, nervous energy in the air. I wore the same navy suit, still no makeup. "My name is Talitha Gorin," I began, "and this is what emotional fraud looks like when it hides inside a hug." The auditorium held its breath. I spoke for 15 minutes. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. I ended with this: if you were born into the wrong story, write yourself out and start a new one. The standing ovation didn't feel like a victory. It felt like recognition. Afterward, a publisher approached me about a memoir. I smiled, said I'd think about it, and left her card in my pocket. That afternoon, I didn't go to lunch. I drove out to a trailhead just outside the city, left my phone in the car, took a small bottle of water and Roscoe's letter in my backpack. I walked for hours, just the sound of my shoes on gravel and birds overhead. At the overlook, I sat on a rock, opened the letter one more time, and read the words he'd written years before. "You were always enough." Healing isn't loud. It's quiet choices stacked over time. Not all endings come with doors slamming. Some come with the slow click of a lock turning. From the inside, they didn't slam the door on me. I closed it myself and locked it from the other side.